Right, so President Cyril Ramaphosa has urged political parties to overcome their differences and find common ground to form the first national coalition government in South Africa's young democracy. His comments come in a speech after the final election results were announced, confirming that no party won a majority in last week's vote. The results announced on Sunday said to be the worst election showing for the ANC. Well, for some analysis now, we're joined by political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng. Asanda, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, we just played that piece there of a police minister alongside the minister in the presidency talking about their concerns about stability as we go into coalition talks between the various political parties. And then there's so many elements to look at, right? I mean, 579 complaints by 21 political parties. Are these going to be bones of contention? And as the ANC decides which way it leans, which political party it leans towards, is this do or die, certainly for the country?
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. I think that, this is, as people predicted, or at least as Rise Mzansi had said, that 2024 was going to be our 1994. So it looks like all bets are off. So things that we thought we knew before are showing themselves to be things that we don't know. Alliances that we assumed were dead or were never going to happen are likely to happen. So it's going to depend on the African National Congress and how they decide to form a government, where South Africa is going to go and whether South Africa is going to be in a successful state or in a dismal state. And I think that, the kind of partner that they choose is definitely going to be determined by how the ANC thinks that partner is going to behave and whether that partner is going to be able to support them in governing for, the best interest of all South Africans. And I've been looking at the options, whether it's going to be ANC and MK or ANC and MK and EFF or ANC and EFF and the Patriotic Alliance or ANC and DA or ANC and the smaller parties. And I'm beginning to believe that what's probably likely to happen is that we're going to have a government of national unity, because that is likely the best way for the ANC to retain kind of its 40% and its dominance, while also making sure that it balances out without necessarily having to actually fight or argue or negotiate with anyone, while making sure that South Africa's system of proportional representation has everybody in all the voices and constituencies represented in parliament in a way that is equal. So it's almost as if, in a way, our system actually already solved this. But the concern always with coalition governments or even a government of national unity is how these parties come together. Will they stay together, and how long can they stay together?
Yeah, and then of course there's the issue of the sort of negotiations that take place around leadership, right? I mean, at this point you're seeing some speakers already saying, no, we cannot let go of Paul Mashatile as deputy president. SG Mbalula saying that any discussions in coalitions that ask for the removing of Ramaphosa are simply a no-go. I mean, where do you likely see this going?
I mean, I think, of course, they're going to say that, they're not going to remove the president. But at the end of the day, if removing the president is what will get them whatever it is, the outcome that they've decided they want, I think, President Cyril Ramaphosa may go. And I think Paul Mashatile may be the one who's ushered in. We know, for example, that the MK has already been clear that they will only discuss with a Paul Mashatile president and not a Jacob Zuma and not a Cyril Ramaphosa president. And I think, what's interesting for me is also that there is always the possibility that we haven't discussed enough, which is a minority government wherein all the small political parties, outside of the ANC come together. Then the ANC becomes the official opposition. And then the president is basically just, is just voted on the basis of what political parties want. And the president could come from outside of the ANC. But that all depends on how the ANC uses the power that it has. At this point, they are in the most powerful position because they retain a 40% vote, which means they have the most votes. It may not be the 50% majority needed to govern outright, but they have the majority of the votes.
I mean, one of the biggest outcomes of this election, Asanda, is something that you can't deny, is certainly KwaZulu-Natal, right? I mean, it's the province that when we talk about political killings, there's always a great concern around how KwaZulu-Natal is. And then the ANC in third position in that province. I mean, firstly, I'm wondering what, if you're a fly on the wall inside the room where the ANC KZN is concerned, what that looks like. You know, is it humility? Is it planning? What does that planning even look like about who they speak to, certainly in the province? And I wonder if an event such as, you know, the anniversary of the death of King Cetshwayo, for instance, where we saw the ANC and the IFP come to a head over the Prime Minister of the Amazulu Nation, is at all in the forefront of how they're thinking about how they did in the province.
Well, I mean, I've been thinking about KZN and you know, some of my thoughts are, first of all, that you know, it's going to be interesting to see what happens to the king and where his allegiances lies, because remember, he came out to seemingly betting for the IFP, and now that the IFP is only second and not first in place, it's going to be interesting to see how he moves, and because it's going to have, you know, this whole MK being the governing party in KZN is going to have an impact on him and his ability to be able to exercise his royal power or his monarchy in essence. And so he's now, to my mind, become top of mind in terms of how he is also going to be an outsider that's going to have an impact on what's going to happen in Parliament, or at the very least an influence. And then I think also that it's going to be interesting to see how the MK is going to figure itself out as an opposition party, essentially. I'll explain what I mean by this. So in the Western Cape, one of the biggest issues that they always say is that, you know, we struggle to govern the Western Cape sometimes because national government does these things or doesn't agree with us or doesn't give us enough money, etc., etc. So my question is, how is it going to play out when you're going to have a potentially, you know, ANC majority, whether they kind of become the majority opposition, however things lie, but they're going to have the biggest influence at national, and then you're going to have the MK in province. So in a way, while they've won, because their winnings are concentrated in an area that ultimately still falls under the ANC dominance, there is going to be some interesting things happening there. And I think that could be the bargaining chip that the ANC uses, that, you know, you need to actually you know, negotiate with us because we have power over you when it comes to this province where you've just gotten power, and we can determine how far and how wide that power is going to be. And of course, KZN people in the ANC are going to have to realign their entire life and rethink their entire lives as things have kind of begun to become clearer in terms of their loss, unfortunately.
Yeah, listen, one thing is true, is that there is so much to analyze as we get closer and closer to seeing how those coalition agreements are going to be playing out. But we'll wrap it up for there. Asanda, thank you so much for your time. Political analyst there, Asanda Ngoasheng, speaking to us this morning.